Who goes first? Good morning.
What?
It's still the morning.
Yeah, there you go. I guess you're going first.
Bam. I was gonna say good afternoon, but it's still the morning.
Yeah.
Oh well, wait. It's the morning for me. Well, good afternoon. This whole
Time has no meaning.
yeah. I mean, part of the goal with this podcast is goal the right word? I don't know. We were gonna go over like what it's like to move around all over the place and have kids and whatnot. Uh, like take your kids with you through that process. I think dealing with crazy time zones is one of those things you just never really get a perfect handle on, I guess.
Yeah. It was kind of odd even just during the pandemic because at work lots of people are working remotely now. Like some people are working from their original homes in the States. Some people are working temporarily from like Belgium or wherever. Like we're all supposed to be in Montreal, so meetings can be kind of odd. I was back in the East Coast for a little bit, so it was only a 1 hour time difference, but like surprisingly, even in Canada, some people don't realize that there's a time zone further east than Eastern time zone.
I think nobody knows that. Like, there's no consciousness. Like for where I'm at, Nova Scotia, where I'm from, and where my parents live, is a 4 hour time difference. And like when I tell that to people, it's so weird to them.
Yeah,
Like 4 hours, like they imagine my parents must live out in the middle of the ocean or something.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
it's always great when you get to educate them that not only is there that extra time zone, but then there's like half an extra time zone with Newfoundland.
well, I mean, when I was in Nova Scotia, I tended to forget that. So I mean, that's certainly an oddity. It's interesting when you think of it. How much of this continent is even in that time zone? I think it's the
Yeah,
four easternmost provinces of Canada, excluding Newfoundland.
yeah,
So what's that? 3 million people. So a little under 1%. Like it's just such a small
yeah,
number. Yeah.
yeah. So I was reading some interesting news today.
Tell me about it.
I went on the tweeters, the twit, whatever it's called, Twitter.
Go
Uh,
on. Yep.
I saw a headline. I'm not looking at the actual tweet, so I can't read you that tweet. But I have the link still open here to BusinessWire, which clearly means that it's important news. Uh,
I should just go on.
I mean,
Tell me the important business news.
they've been aggregated to our podcast, so clearly it's important news.
Definitely, yes.
Nintendo partners with Play. I'm assuming it's PlayVS, to bring competitive fun to high school varsity athletics across the U.S. and Canada. And I don't know if I should read the article word for word, but the gist of it, from
Yes,
what I can
please.
understand, is that this company PlayVS has announced that they are going to be including Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and Splatoon 2 into high school varsity athletics, which to me is bananas.
I find it interesting that any esports are being included in high school varsity athletics, honestly.
Yeah, I mean,
Not in
I,
an oppositional way necessarily. I just imagine all these like maybe like conservative parents who, want to see their son be the captain of the football team, and now like they're sharing that mantle a bit with those nerds that just play games all the time or something, right? Like that stigma's still there in 2021. So
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, esports have been around for a little while. I remember participating in a tournament through I think Newegg.com back in like 2008 or 2009 or something. So I mean, clearly, if it was mainstream enough that I was aware of it back then, it had to have been going on even earlier.
oh come on, you're pretty deep under the mainstream blanket. I feel like the real and I could be wrong. I mean, we're like a couple old timers talking on this podcast these days, but seriously, I think the esports renaissance was kind of an early 2010s thing, was it not? Like,
Yeah.
wasn't it was kind of like the appearance of Twitch really pushed it along, and then I kind of
Yep.
remember going to PAX in the
PAX.
early 2010s, and it was like it wasn't just starting, but it was just starting to really gain momentum and like be a serious thing, and like they were opening up more halls for esports specifically, and like you go the next year, and all of a sudden that space is double what it was the previous, and it was just really rolling at that point, and now it feels like it's been around long enough to get really established. I mean, clearly, if they're bringing it to high schools, we can say that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's always felt weird to me. I've always been a doer more than a watcher.
Right.
I mean, I had a basketball net when I was a kid, and I loved to go out and shoot some hoops, as the kids say.
So
Uh,
weird coming from you, man.
I mean, I think when I was in grade 6, I was on the school basketball team, and then
So weird coming from you, man.
when I was in grade 7, I failed to make the basketball team. So, so that was basically the end of my athletics career.
I don't know if
Uh,
mine ever even started. So
but I don't know. It's always felt I enjoy doing things. I enjoyed playing basketball. I enjoyed playing video games, but I never so much enjoyed watching other people do it.
yep.
Um, and I mean, I'm clearly in a minority group, or at least I what is
Presume.
the word? Perceive myself to be in a minority group. Because
Probably are,
every
yeah.
bar that you go to, there's going to be people who are clamoring for the Leafs to win.
The Canadian example and everything. You know, I think I think honestly we're very much that demographic that's like sports, but like I think sports are actually really awesome when you think of them in a certain way, right? Like if you think of like very like countries that are not wealthy and they don't have like electronics all over the place
Mhm.
and everything, and like all you need is a soccer ball and the kids have fun all day. You just play this game and it's good exercise, blah 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 blah. Like I have no issue with sports at all. I think
Mhm.
they're great, right? Like it's awesome. It's just another like it's games too, right? Like sports are competitive games.
Yeah,
The culture of sports, particularly,
the tribalism.
yeah, I mean, the way I know it, at least, like from a, I guess, a North American perspective, is just weird to me. And like, of course, sports are, I guess, like the whole like jock thing, like right from when you're in even like high school already there's like this distinction between the people who play sports and the people who like aren't good at sports or whatever. Like it's weird that it's been elevated to this like societal pedestal that it's on, to me, I guess.
Which feels weird to me as a Canadian, but Canada, from what I understand, isn't nearly as bananas as America is. Like college football is a phenomenon
Yep.
south of our border.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, I kind of stay out of that scene, so I don't even know a ton. But like, you can't avoid it, and even like NFL, like pro league stuff. Obviously, we all know the Super Bowl is like the most viewed one like X hour slot each year in the whole continent, and so on. And like, I can just say, having moved from Canada to the U.S. to Seattle. Um, the amount of love this city has for its football team is bananas, just off the charts. It's crazy, crazy, crazy to me. Like whenever they're playing, you walk outside and the amount of people wearing the jersey on that day.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to.
I
Like every
mean,
time.
there were riots in Vancouver for the Stanley Cup.
Yes, there were riots for the Stanley Cup, but I still think it's very different. I still think it's very different. Like a riot is something that like a few bad actors can incite, and then a bunch of drunk people who are upset can like get all rambunctious. Like the riot
Yeah.
was ridiculous. Trust me, I'm not like that was just crazy. But like here, it's just like a very unimportant game, but they're playing, and you walk outside, and like a third of every person is wearing the jersey.
Mm.
Like massive, massive participation in this activity. I guess this, I don't want to say cult, whatever this. I don't know, legion of
Movement.
followership. Yeah. And like, I don't want to, I feel like if there's any Seattle people listening, they'd hate on me, but like, it's such an ugly jersey. Like, it's such an eyesore walking around outside when they're
Oh
playing,
yeah.
because it's like everyone's wearing this ugly ass green and blue, neon green and dark blue jersey. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not for me.
I
I don't,
find it I find it a little crazy here in Montreal because I mean, uh, growing up there was a baseball team called the Montreal Expos,
yep.
and I don't follow sports close enough to know at what point that team ceased to exist. I seem to recall that it ceased to exist roughly 20 years ago.
20 years, I wonder. I feel like, yeah, or the
Give or
90s.
take.
Yeah, it was definitely, I remember them. I remember their logo, so they were around at least when I was very young.
Yeah,
But sure, yeah.
but the point is that there are still people selling Montreal Expos merchandise in the gift shops here, and lots of people who are buying it and wearing it, and the
Hoping they'll
team
come
doesn't
back.
exist.
Yeah. Maybe it's like I don't want to get political, but like those people that have the Confederate flag because it's like it
Yeah,
means something to them, you know, like it's that kind of.
it's part of our heritage, right?
Oh man, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, like, I'm not even a baseball fan, but I can again see if like it's some kids outdoors, it's a hot day, you have a bat, a ball, let's play. This is fun. We get some exercise, hoo ha. But when you elevate the sport to this ridiculous level of like, I don't know, almost like politicized societal importance, it's just really odd. I don't see esports getting there yet. I don't know.
Well, that's kind of the question that I was going to ask. Is like now that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is going to be in this esports high school competition, what's going to happen with all the super hardcore Smash people that are in high school that are going to start arguing that Smash is not an esport?
Well, I'm not one of those people and don't know. That's an interesting place to focus. Like, not like,
I mean, it's a party game, right?
right? Yeah. That's actually very funny because it goes against everything Nintendo likes to proclaim publicly about the Smash series, and then they partner to make it into a esport that presumably is a little more serious than a party game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is something. I mean, if you look at the history of Nintendo and like esports, it's a very rough history. There's been a lot of instances of people trying to partner with Nintendo or kind of unofficially do like tournaments with Nintendo games, particularly Smash, obviously, and then Nintendo coming down hard on that, trying to close them down, getting a lot of pushback, and so that was an interesting piece in my mind coming out of this news that I guess Nintendo's finally kind of coming around a little bit.
Yeah, it seems a little bit interesting. I mean, going back to what you said with PAX, I'm pretty sure that when I went there, I wandered into the esports arena that was going on, and it was probably StarCraft
Yeah.
2 stuff that was going on. And I feel like, despite how ancient that game is, it's still at the top of the scene. Like
Yeah.
maybe I don't know, maybe Fortnite and some other stuff is starting to catch on, but yeah, it that to me seemed a little interesting. Just the fact that like Smash and Mario Kart are going to be considered here. Like
Mario Kart 2. Okay.
it's definitely a different world. Like when I was in high school, the internet was barely even a thing that we had. Like there certainly weren't like there may have been
Facebook.
LAN parties going on where there was competitions or something, but
Mhm.
it was definitely not as widely spread then as it is now. And to me, it's just fascinating that it's gotten to the point where it is spreading through the high schools to the point where it's considered a sanctioned varsity sport. And then like we've got people like my son who are growing up where like this has just been kind of normalized for his entire life.
Mhm.
And like instead of watching cable TV, he's watching streamers on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I think we're taking a bit of a uh, Americentric, West centric view here. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like there's been a lot more acceptance of games generally in Asia for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, you can play games without being a nerd. Like here, like in the say early '90s.
Yeah, I mean,
I was little, but
I guess somewhat related. I recently watched The Queen's Gambit.
mhm.
I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a
I'm
pretty well
aware of it. Yeah,
it's a pretty well done show that's on Netflix.
yeah,
And it's a chess
yep.
show. Like it's about someone who's playing competitive chess, and
Mhm.
like that's I guess kind of the only relevancy is just that like it's kind of completely acknowledged by everyone in that show that Europe is it. Like Russia is the place to go if you want to play competitive chess, right?
I think it's
And
acknowledged generally, is it not?
I mean, I don't play chess, so I don't know the actual world in it. But this is just my entry point. Is just like at least since the early uh, or mid 1900s, like it's been well established that like games are a way of earning a living in Europe with like chess and stuff. But that still wasn't particularly
Ah,
accepted in the West, in the United States.
yep.
So I guess it's kind of interesting. Like, yeah, like South Korea, I guess, got a huge like gaming scene. Um,
like competitive gaming.
yeah, yeah.
And a fascinating one too if you read about it. Like there's fandoms, and I assume you've seen a little bit. Like they actually like these players get sponsors, and then they get popular, and then a lot of them are male, and a lot of their fans are female, and so uh, the it's not just a matter of like being good at the game. You also have to like work out and be like in great shape and look good and for the magazine shoot and whatnot, right?
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like this evolving culture that straddles, I guess, like a few things, which is I think we're still pretty far from that here,
Yeah.
but it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest reason I strayed away from the competitive scene myself. Is just I was sick of having to maintain my appearance.
Yeah, being chased by the ladies a little too much to handle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right on. I hear you. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wonder too. Like this is kind of related to another topic I've had in mind for a long time to talk about and haven't really mentioned. But like, I'm always fascinated, I guess, by the differences in different genres of game. So you look at like video games or card
Hmm.
games or sports or whatever, and like it has always struck me as weird that video games are not really seen as timeless. You look at
Yeah,
like football. They played
yeah.
football in the 60s, and maybe there was something bad. It was an unpopular rule, or like a lot of people were getting injured. And so they'll refine it, they'll iterate, they'll change the rules one year or change the field size or whatever. But then the next year you come back and you play football again. And here we are in 2021 and people are still playing football. And so it's weird to me that like look at Melee. Like Melee is a very old game, and it was
Hmm.
before people were like it was 2001 I think was the release date, and so Nintendo released it once and done. There's no patches, nothing. So it's kind of part of that old era, and so there's a lot of broken things and so forth. But let's make an assumption that it was kind of an ideal Smash game. Like why couldn't we just play that forever, right?
Hmm.
And this idea, like whether you agree with that or not, this idea that there's like this necessary obsolescence, is that the right word, that
Hmm.
happens, is just kind of weird to me. Like I guess it's relevant here because they're doing this for Smash Ultimate. Does that mean Smash Ultimate is kind of like the game? Like we're done. That's like Smash. We can now do Smash Ultimate as a varsity esport. And when I grow up, my kids are also going to do Smash Ultimate. Like no way, right? They're going to come up with Smash Ultimate 2 or Smash Super Ultimate or whatever. And so like it just feels like even within esports, I mean, we can talk about the longevity of Melee popularity or StarCraft popularity, but generally it feels like these games are popular for a good run for a game would be like what 5-10 years. Even that's kind of on the long side. And then the sequel comes out and it's a very different game and you just move on from it. Me, I'm very much into like older games, but
Hmm.
like I just feel like a lot of them are kind of timeless. They're not necessarily like guaranteed obsoleted by things, just in the same way that like chess, people still play chess. They never came out with chess 2 and chess 3. It just doesn't make sense, right?
I think someone did actually make Chess 2 recently for PC.
Battle chess 2. I mean,
uh,
Star Trek has 3D chess.
Chess 2, the sequel on Steam. It's August 19th, 2014.
My point is invalidated entirely. I'm waiting for football 2. It's going to
Well,
be
I
even more
mean,
popular Super Bowl.
I'm curious how much of that has to do with like the flow of information and stuff, because like chess is a fairly old game from what I
Hmm.
understand. It hasn't maybe evolved too much, but like if you do look at football, I'm looking at a link here, sutori.com. It's like the football was created by Walter Camp. He's known as the father of the American football. He invented the football in the year 1869.
Oh, wow.
And that was also the first year football was recorded. It was played at the College of Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey. The teams that played were Princeton University students and the Rutgers students. The first football was a mix of soccer and rugby, and the game was also first. The first game was a mix of soccer and rugby game. So it's like by the 80s, 1880s, most athletic clubs had a football team. But if you consider it like that, it was originally like a mix of soccer and rugby. That's where the two sports kind of spread out. Like they started getting like the gridiron football, which is in America, and Australia really grappled on to rugby.
Yeah.
Europe really grappled on to quote unquote football, which is
Yep.
what they started calling soccer. But that's kind of where there is confusion. Is it was football and then it became football, but they're two different sports, right?
Yep.
And then there's a Canadian rules versus American rules for football. So even for sports, I think there was a lot of evolution happening there. So it kind of makes sense that as we get into creation of newer games, particularly electronic ones, where it is easy for developers to just patch it with new rules or whatever, that there would be less longevity.
I see that. I just think it's interesting because, I mean, even in the sports example you just gave, like that's a slow evolution over time. There's
Mm-hmm.
still kind of like an accepted group of rules at any one
Yeah.
time, and a lot of people are invested in that group of rules. Like, there's not like one small company that can decide, okay, from now on, all football will be played with these rules. They can't just change it on everyone. Whereas, like in esports, generally these games have a developer who would then own the
Yeah.
property and maybe make the sequel. I mean, Melee, I
Which.
think just I'll finish my thought really quick.
Mhm.
Melee, I think, is an interesting one because, like, if you're a fan of the series, it just plays very differently than the subsequent games. And you
Mhm.
can look at the Melee, like the really hardcore Melee people, and a lot of them don't necessarily like the new games, or maybe they play Melee and they play the new ones, and it's kind of like two different things for them.
Mhm.
And just the direction of the series has gone more party game, more random things happening, more like less fast paced action, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just interesting that because of the choices made by Nintendo, the company, which is a
Mhm.
small company, this game Melee doesn't. There's no modern version that's like that anymore. Like, I think small rule tweaks can have such a huge impact to the way the game is played. It's effectively a
Yeah.
different game, right? And you can say that of sports. You could change a rule and now it's very different. But like those rules happen gradually, and if you change it too much, people would probably protest. Like if they announce there's going to be two footballs on the field at all times starting next year, like people would be like, "What is this? This is a different sport," and they'd
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
upset, right? Whereas like if Nintendo announced in the next Smash Brothers, whatever, right? There's going to be 20 people fighting. Well, what can you do? You just go with it, right?
Yeah.
I guess it's just interesting to me that a smaller group of people um, hold the destiny of this esport in their hands,
Mhm.
and they change it in discrete chunks. Like it's not like every year there's like new patches and it develops. No, they release a new game every 5 years. So like every X years there's this discrete, enormous batch of changes that come in,
Yeah.
and now you almost have. It kind of reminds me of the Canadian Football League and the American Football League. You still have the people playing the old version because they prefer it. You still have the people playing the new version because they prefer it, and so you have these two different uh, threads, I guess. That
But
could be interesting for any sort of varsity esport in the future too.
and then there's always like the house rules, like
Yeah, yeah,
items or no items, or
yeah. Exactly, exactly. I wonder how they. I mean, I owe it to myself to go and read the article and kind of figure. Uh, like I didn't. I skimmed the article. I'll be honest. I just saw the news headline and skimmed it
yeah, yeah.
as you're going through it. But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting if there's like one governing body that's going to reside over this across all high schools or something, like they do with, say, I don't know, football, basketball, whatever.
I mean that's kind of what they. It sounds like this PlayVS is. Um.
Right.
Oh, I wonder if the VS is supposed to be varsity sports. I was saying versus.
Hmm.
Uh. But yeah, it's interesting. Like so, where I was saying that back in the early part of the millennium, I did some competitive Left 4 Dead 2. Like the tournament that I was in, it was interesting because like everyone who was playing had to screen record so that like they could, if someone was being accused of cheating, you could like go back and
Right.
tell
Yep.
whether or not they were. But so there were rules that you had to follow for that, because it's like it's interesting to play a video game where people can customize the game.
Hmm.
Like you can add mods or whatever. Like you could change the shader so that anything that's a human is like a bright white shader, which is going to make it easier to find if you're not a human or something, right?
Yep.
Um, or like you could patch the audio to be louder or something. Like there's all sorts of little tweaks like that you can do. So there was like specific preference files that everyone had to put on their computer to make sure that everyone had like the exact same settings on uh like how fast your character rotates and stuff. And
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. It's like, say, in the Olympics, like that's sports at a very serious level, of course. But
Mhm.
you think of the level of computer involvement, and it's all just about recording, right? They don't interfere or change the way people play the sports generally, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah,
So,
you
like,
can throw your javelin however you want to throw it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like in the biathlon, you know, there's different guns you use or something. I don't know, but for the most part, it's all purely human uh, athleticism that matters, and the whole role of the computer is to like film this very closely. You know, you have the finish line cam that you can see like the hair on whose head hair crossed the finish line first, and so forth. But with esports, suddenly the computer, this massively complicated thing, is central to the way that the game is played, and so
Yeah,
the ability to have cheating or weird, I don't know, glitches or something uh, is much larger, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I wasn't. I think I only really did just the one tournament, and that was enough for me to decide that I enjoy gaming a lot, but I don't enjoy the commitment to practicing a game.
that's interesting. I
Uh,
think the seeking mastery in something is something a lot of people really enjoy, and so if they're able to take that and do it in the context of games and they like games, that's kind of like it fits their Venn diagram of an enjoyable activity. Like I have some
mhm.
of that. I play Melee a lot. I agree with you at some level though. Still, like I'm not really interested in going to tournaments and then like having some sort of public persona and like making a job out of it.
Mm,
It's not really for me, and so I don't. It'd be interesting even over the next 5 years to see where esports goes, and if it can maintain this momentum, and you actually have maybe even like more like what we see in Korea, maybe not to that level, but like well paid esports people
mhm,
being cultured at the high school level, right? Like all this kind of thing, um, where it's actually something you can do as a job. That would be very
mm,
interesting. Definitely not really for me necessarily, I guess, but yeah. I think actually, if I can go back to one of the first points you mentioned, which was about how you maybe enjoyed playing sports a little bit, but you
mhm.
certainly were never a watcher. Esports is interesting because, and maybe this is actually probably what like people who watch physical sports feel, I think. But like, I would never watch a game I don't know anything about, or I don't know the rules for, or I just kind
Mhm.
of learned the rules and I'm like, okay, neat, but like, and have no investment in. It's very different when you're invested in the game, I think, I guess, because at least for me, when I watch like Melee matches and stuff, I know at a fairly deep level what's happening, and like when someone does some amazing thing, I can tell. And part
Yeah.
of it is that it's like a learning experience. Like I have the characters I use, so I watch those characters fight, and I watch what those high level players do, and I think, okay, I should do that, or that's how you fight against that person. And just in the course of watching, so that I can get a little bit better at the game, it's you just kind of realize it's kind of fun. You watch some really high energy matches. You know, it's not too different than watching two mechs fight each other in Gundam or something, right? It's like you know, cool. Oh, that was cool, man. And then you're kind of into it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a little different too than sports, where like, or sorry, I guess like physical sports, where like people tend to have this allegiance to the the team associated with whatever city and so forth. I mean, maybe that happens with esports, right? Like your favorite esports person is from your hometown or something. I don't know, whatever. But like for me, my level of watching just melee matches is kind of that, right? Like I play the game, I know what is hard to do and what's easy to do, and I see these high level players and it's impressive, and I can learn from it. And so
It's
that's yeah, my
it's
take on the whole thing.
it's interesting. I guess like I feel like uh it a lot of people who are into it are like really into like learning about the particular athletes themselves, right? It's not about watching the game, it's about watching Tom Brady. Uh
And that
like
mirrors what you see, I think, in like Korea, or from what I've
yeah,
seen,
yeah, yeah.
with like yeah, like you would look up a particular uh, StarCraft player, and they have a profile, and everything about them is there, and then there's a documentary about them. And if you watch the documentary, it's not really them playing the game; it's like all about them. Like that's the focus of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's interesting because like I guess that's where a lot of people are deriving their fandom from is like this story that's going on, and I understand that component of it. Like I really like the Rocky films.
yeah.
Uh, like
So weird coming from you.
well, I mean, I enjoy the underdog story of it, right? Like I enjoy that there's this person who tries really hard and overcomes the challenge and wins. And I think part of what I hate about actual sports is that it's not always the underdog that's winning.
They lose.
Like,
They
yeah,
usually lose, right?
they'll usually lose, and it's like the person who could be like the biggest asshole can be the winner.
Yeah,
and
real
I,
life
and
sucks, right?
I yeah, real life sucks. And then that's why I play games. So
Well, that's fair. Here's a huge digression for you.
Mhm.
Um, I read a lot of Asian comics, and I don't know if you've heard of the Firebird series. It doesn't really
No.
matter, but it's one of the I guess most famous series by the same guy that made Astro Boy.
Okay.
And he did a lot of stuff, but this particular one is kind of like his favorite of all the ones he did, and he died before he finished it. But it's this
Mhm.
really weird series where like the story jumps around all over the place, but it always reconnects with the same group of people across all these different times, like different dimensions. Even it's just this crazy, crazy story. But in the course of reading it, I just realized it's so disconnected from any of that like Joseph Campbell stuff or any of the kind of pattern type stories you tend to see, like Hollywood movies or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, there's just no concept of revenge. All the characters that you like that are really cool will die these unceremonious deaths. All the bad
Mm.
guys will just go on their way and live and be fine. Like everything, you never know what's going to happen in these stories because it just doesn't try and please the audience at all. Like it just does whatever, and it's really weird. It's fascinating for me to read it just because I feel like it's so rare that stories are done that way. Like we always have that moment where like the underdog wins or the
Yeah.
bad guy gets eaten by the shark and you're like, yes. Even in like a really dead serious whatever Citizen Kaney type thing, like they still kind of have like this triumph of the good side or like the moral
Yeah.
or something. And I get your point. I almost feel like I'm not. I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate because I'm not someone who
Mhm.
wants to go watch sports, but just like that, I think there's a bit of fun in that for some people, right? I guess, throw out an example of Smash Brothers. Sometimes I'm watching two players and I know who they are, and I know one is a superstar and one's kind of an up and coming, and I know the up and coming guy is going to lose, and almost always they do. But like when they do not lose and they win, it's like yes, right? Like there's only one Rocky. Well, there's like 20 of them, I guess, but there's one Rocky one, right? And like that was the one underdog story, and he didn't win, but he kind of like you know what I mean. Like in in the movies, that's just your one instance of that happening, and
Yeah.
generally the underdog is the winner or whatever. So it doesn't feel as special as real life when you've watched this exact scenario 100 times, and now this time the underdog actually won. Wow, right? I
Yeah.
guess there's a bit of that, like the real shock value that comes in from like reality being the basis of the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe that's where the whole tribalism thing is stemming from, where like people are hoping that
Yeah,
their underdog is going to pull through, and that somehow that them going out to the bar and supporting their team is going to contribute to that story.
yeah, there's probably elements of that. I imagine some of it is just general human social behavior. You want
Yeah.
a group that you identify with. So, I mean, if you're a big, I don't know, hockey, I guess I know more about hockey. If you're a big hockey fan,
Mm.
how do you choose a team to identify with? I mean, all you've really got is like maybe the players, like this guy's from my hometown and he's on that team, or where the team calls its home city. Like, there's not a lot you can really use, so you use those things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there was in the East Coast there was this big rivalry between the Toronto teams and the Montreal teams.
Oh, I remember.
Nobody cared about the other Quebec teams. Like there was two Quebec hockey teams, and pretty much everyone only cared about the Montreal one.
The other was Quebec City,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe there's more a familiarity with Montreal, or they're just more cool to like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe they just weren't a good performing team or something. The I think it was the Quebec North Stars or something.
Nordiques,
Nordiques, yeah. And
Nordiques,
then they were bought and became the something Stars,
U.S.
Dallas
team.
Stars.
Yeah, something. Whatevs. Esports. Seriously, though, I'm very curious how this will play out. Like as a news item, it's kind of like okay, cool, but I would like this might even be like a really interesting thing to talk about in 5 years or 2 years. Like, how
Yeah, I
did this
mean,
go? Right?
yeah, I mean, I'm curious if this would have gone as far if it weren't for the pandemic. Like maybe that has
That's
some sort of a
interesting.
role in it, in that like people are playing more games now than they used to, and you're less encouraged to go to sports arenas and something. I don't know.
It's very possible. It might be that. It might be a sign of the times. One thing, like I'm very out of touch with modern high schoolers. I wonder
Yeah.
what the reception is there. I can see again like the crowds who are really like excited about it. I can see people who think it's dumb. I'm just wondering what that ratio is. Like if this happened when I was in high school, and it was the the 90s, the end
Mm.
of the 90s and the start of the noughties. Like, I just think attitudes of the time, like, it would be considered a nerdy thing, and you would
Mm.
be maybe a bit of an outcast, right? Like, is that still the case, or is this accepted at a level where, like, the esports star is cool and
I mean,
he or
like,
she gets a boyfriend girlfriend and isn't like beat up by the jock, right? Like that whole ridiculous high school thing. Like, what's the state of things now?
um, I mean, I don't know who's at the top right now, but I mean, for the longest time, wasn't PewDiePie like the wealthiest person on YouTube? Like
Yeah,
someone.
yep, yep,
Okay,
yep.
so now I
Now
think I'm
is it Ninja now? Like, I'm so out of touch with all this stuff, to be honest.
no, I think I actually mentioned to you in a different podcast, whether it's live or not now, I'm not sure. But my kid watches YouTube a
Hmm.
lot, and there was a trend of videos that he was watching where people just unbox toys.
Yeah, no, I know these are. Yeah, I've
So
seen these.
so here's the article from the Irish Times. 9-year-old earns 24 million euros as the highest paid YouTuber of 2020, Ryan Kaji of Ryan's World, and that's what his family does is they open up toys.
The
So
the
so he
feedback is wonderful because once you get popular, people are just sending you toys, right? So you don't even have
yeah
any expense anymore.
yeah exactly. It's like not only is he earning money from opening them, but not everything he's opening is free.
Yeah.
But so that's I guess irrelevant. But for the longest time, yeah, PewDiePie was the highest earning YouTuber for playing games, and then yeah, Ninja was on Twitch at least the highest earning.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I feel like the fact that there are people who are millionaires from playing video games is kind of a sign that it's more acceptable than it was when I don't know someone would beat you up if they saw you playing Pokemon.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'd still love to see data. Like, I feel like high school is its own special little place,
Yeah,
terrible special place. Like, if you think of like Ninja or something, like there's probably like college kids watching him, people our age watching him, little kids watching him. Like, it's very possible that that can be popular everywhere but high school, where all of a
yeah.
sudden your mind flips to whatever it is that high school kids' minds flip to. Um, I don't know. I think I agree with you. I'd just be curious to get a better sampling of that.
So, speaking of stats, I just looked it up. This is from Syracuse University. They say uh, technology consulting firm Activate estimates more than 250 million people watch esports. And then they mention Ninja as being one of the
Mhm.
Ninja. Wait, he was he he was on the cover of ESPN magazine.
Wow.
Uh, so Blevins is one of among many gaming superstars, and that elite group is about to get bigger. By 2020, Activate suggests that 70 million people will watch a single esports final, which is higher than the viewership for U.S. professional baseball, soccer, and hockey finals.
Yep. Yep. Um, yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting. I wonder what that demographic looks like. I mean, I imagine it skews young, right? But you,
Yeah,
like, I do
like
think
there's no
that
way my dad is watching StarCraft.
that'll be our next episode.
There's
The
no way he's
shocking
watching
reveal.
StarCraft, let alone Smash.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt it skews young, but I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game world that our kids grow up in, I'd say, or are growing up in already.
It's crazy. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I don't know. I'm just like imagining like the next set of high school movies. Like we had like Revenge of the Nerds and stuff, and now it's gonna have to be like Revenge of the Jocks. And
Yeah. It could fly, right? That's funny. But really, I mean, a high school teen targeted movie is a time capsule, right? You watch those 80s ones, you watch the 90s ones, you watch the more modern ones, and you can feel that cultural drift over time.
yeah,
What is the 2032 high school movie look like?
yeah. Well, I mean, forget just like the high school trend, but like you compare when we were in high school, what were the big films? They were the big uh, productions at the time, like
Hmm.
Star Wars, but like there weren't really any successful superhero films, I don't think, until like Spider-Man came out when we were in
Yep.
high school.
Yep.
And now it's like the top films are all like Marvel films.
Yep. And that used to be nerdy, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like I in junior high I was totally made fun of for drawing comic book related stuff. And now that's like the Spider-Mans and Avengers and stuff are just like everyone knows what they are.
Yep.
I don't think anyone who made fun of me could have told me what Avengers was.
It's funny though. If you look at the data, it hasn't uh, resulted in an increase in comic book sales. People love
No.
the movies, but they haven't gone back
Yeah.
to revisit the comics, or like it hasn't brought any interest into the comics,
Yeah.
which is funny.
I for some reason remember getting out of comics when the digital artwork was becoming much more popular. Like I remember once they started adding like lens flares and stuff onto things, it felt
You paged out.
kind of like it felt like it was a new era and not really as exciting. I
I
really liked like the halftone shading stuff with all the dots.
Yeah, I kind of bite my tongue sometimes because I always assume I'm just like way too retro for everyone else. But you know me, of course I like that, right? I love like if you look at it like an '80s comic where the artist was like super detailed and like did a really good job. Like that's way more fun than some of the awful garbage they churn out nowadays. Probably like very much more quickly with just quick Photoshop stuff. Um, Kind of another dying art in a sense. I was never into comics enough to decide to not read them anymore. It was always kind of just like, okay, whatever. But I never really liked that progression either, personally.
I don't know that it was necessarily an active getting out of it for me. Is it just like faded?
Yeah.
Like when I was young, I was super into it. I would bike to the comic store and get a grab bag full of random comics, and I would buy collectible cards and posters and stuff. And as I got into college, or sorry, as I got into high school, I started becoming way more into music, uh,
Right.
and was playing my guitar a lot. And by the time I went to college, it was just like I bought a comic now and then, but it just didn't stick with me anymore. They'd gotten way too into like these ongoing serial stories where it's like if you missed an episode of Spectacular Spider-Man, then you couldn't follow what was happening in The Amazing Spider-Man. And
You had to buy them all.
yeah.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if I was ever. I always like you could buy like a collection that was one story
Mm,
entirely contained. Maybe it was over a few books, but you just get it all together. Or
yeah.
like Marvel would occasionally release these. I don't even know what you'd call them, compendiums or something.
I
Like
have a
I
few
have,
of those.
yeah, I have well, I have like it's almost like encyclopedias of characters. It's not even stories
Yeah.
sometimes. Like I have the Book of the Dead, which apparently is like a collective thing. I didn't even know, but it's got all the Marvel characters that had ever died up until that point when that was published. And I don't
Right.
know, it's really fascinating because it would show the character and it would show the death scene. It would talk about their origin and their death, and like that's now that story that character's dead, so the whole story is capped off, and you know it. Although I mean, I think they're kind of famous for resurrecting their characters.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, I think that was part of what was happening as I was getting into comics too. Is like they started making like the 2099 series where it was like in the future and it was like all the same heroes, but it was a different person
and
who was the hero,
alternate.
and they kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
realized that wasn't working. So then they just like started going back and resurrecting people and cloning
yeah.
people. And
I always hated that. Yeah, the books. What I liked though was that they were all like this really cool hand drawn pan art, and that was like really fun.
Mhm.
It kind of reeks of the time for sure. Like you can look at it and be like, "That's from the late '80s." Yep. But I mean, I don't know. It's a style I liked. I guess.
Like I said with the halftone stuff, I thought there was something oddly charming about like
Yeah.
the print process where like every now and then like the colors would just be offset and then not fitting in the lines properly. And
Yeah. One of those things our kids will never understand.
yeah. Well, now we have to add like chromatic aberration and stuff into video games intentionally because it's not even shot with an actual camera. And
Yeah. Oh man. Yes, indeed. Well, shall we wrap?
yeah, sounds good.
Cool, cool. All right. Well, good luck.
Good luck, Chuck.
Have fun for the rest of the week, and I will see you next time.
All right. Cheers.
Take care.